Aloha and welcome to the Yogi's Roadmap, to the Sadhana Pada. And Pada, of course, means a piece apart, and it means the foot that we stand on. If we have understanding and we have foundation, whatever we do, we're going to galvanize our efforts. So these insights are meant to it's not something we're memorizing or we're learning, but to feel how they come alive for you. And we'll see how one of the students in the last mentorship described as they kind of trickle into your consciousness, or we'll have flashes of insights in our daily experiences in the nitty-gritty of each moment. And Patanjali says, you know, this information, it's nothing new. What I love about the sutra is that the sutra articulate for us things we already know, things that we can't necessarily put into words, and then it brings it to life within us. It helps us to embody these timeless truths in our own unique way. So let these sutras become a nourishing part of your life. It's not meant to be a burden. It's something you will integrate through your entire lifetime. And the beauty is that each moment, the context offers a new perspective of the sutra. So they're holographic and they're multidimensional, as we are multidimensional and very nuanced beings ourselves. So let us begin with probably the only mantra that Patanjali actually prescribes. And interestingly, each of the sutra is considered to be a mantra, but Patanjali gives us one in particular, and it is Aum. So as we chant the sound, to really feel how the language of yoga, Sanskrit, is a language of internal response. Yoga is an experience of embodiment, and to teach us to go beyond our logic-based perspectives, because honestly, most of life isn't logical, to be able to track somatically, because we can feel presence. We can feel when we are connected to Source. And it's not an idea, it's not a belief, it's a direct experience. So let us begin with a deep exhale all the way down to the soles of your feet. And in that emptiness, feel your own fullness. And receive, siphon in prana. That everything we experience in this world ultimately has a pranic expression. All right. And we will begin with our, let's see, there should be a share screen here. And why can't, all right, we might have a little challenge here. Let me do that. Oh, I get it. Got it. Here we go. And here is our first sutra of the Sadhana Pada. All right. So call and response from heart to heart, mouth to ear is this tradition of the Yoga Sutra. tapaha, tapaha, tapaha svadhyaya, tapaha svadhyaya, tapaha svadhyayeshvara, tapaha svadhyayeshvara, tapaha svadhyayeshvara pranidhanani, tapaha svadhyayeshvara pranidhanani. Tapaha svadhyayeshvara pranidhanani, Kriya Yoga, 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 tapaha svadhyayeshvara pranidhanani, Kriya Yoga. Now more internally, just whisper. Just your lips. Hold space for the resonance, to hear the deep echo of your intuitive awareness, the long-held memory of that which Patanjali says your heart has always known, but your mind has simply forgotten. Okay, so here we are being offered offerings. These are all offerings, insights into yoga as Kriya Yoga. So Kriya means to act. It's the same root as karma, and it's a practical application. It can also mean purification. And yoga, of course, means our sense of wholeness, our ability. The mystic is always searching for wholeness, and wholeness can even contain dissonance and fractures and tensions. In fact, the tensions are what keep space dynamic. So yoga is that expanded and broadened awareness where we can feel things in many different layers, hold things from many different perspectives. And then we have the three aspects of Kriya Yoga, which are actually an integrative approach. There's tapas. Tap means to heat. It means burning, to burn off impurities. It's an aching desire. It's a passion. So it implies that there's really nothing passive in this experience. You know, the yogi wants to extract nectar out of their life. Then we have svadhyaya, and sva is the self, or to sweeten. And dhyaya is meditative self-study, to remember the sacredness, to remember the deeper essence, to remember what's important in life. And then there's Ishvara Prani Dana, which is to rotate ourselves from egocentricity to a deeper awareness, to align ourselves with deeper truths. And ultimately, all of this is the effort of letting go. So purification, self-study, and analysis in tandem with metaphysical teachings and letting go into creative source comprise yoga in action. All right, so let's begin to unpack this potent sutra, which honestly, we could really do a class on each of these aspects, but fortunately, because this sutra, he reframes and reiterates and represents things from many different angles. Probably many of you recognize these from the niyama, yeah? So later in this chapter, we will get time to suck on each one of these possibilities. All right. So here the first word is tapas. It's like, you gotta want it. You have to be like, have this deep aching, this deep longing, this burning inside of you to embrace life, to open. So it's really generated from love and from a passion. And if we approach life passively, we're not going to engage with the wonderful possibilities that are offered to us. So, you know, the yogic path is about the hero's path and living an extraordinary existence versus one that's mediocre, which comes from Latin. It means just halfway up the mountain. And as we know from the first chapter, Hatha Yoga, it's a sense of commitment that we're ride or die. We're gonna go for it instead of just letting life happen to us, to realize that like this is it and this is so precious and it's such a gift. It's a deep gratitude for our existence. So mantra that I like to put with this, in fact, it's from my next book, is I am a positive force of life. That's the mantra. It's like I engage, I galvanize my experience. Where chapter 1 focused more on how to remedy spiritual alienation or estrangement. It speaks about the challenges we might face, awakening prajna, wisdom, which is the wisdom of no wisdom, the practice of no practice. It takes a lot of letting go to get there. So in this chapter, we are being given more pragmatic approaches into the embodiment process, and to realize that this is not, dogmatic or theoretical. Everyone is welcome. There is some risk involved because once you wake up, it's hard to go back to sleep. And Patanjali warns that life as you have known it is probably never going to be the same because your awareness expands. So to realize that what he's presenting you here is not a dogma. It is not philosophical. It is for you to cultivate your own psychology and your own cosmology, your own understanding, so that we take these words to develop our own experience of self-inquiry and self-actualization, and to gain clarity in our own mind, body, and heart, to develop our own direct experience. So the very title of this chapter is Sadhana. And sadar means to go directly to the goal of na, the eternal cosmic vibration, or of samadhi. And samadhi is a state of coherency. It's a state of presence. It's a state of wholeness and integration. So this chapter is much more practical than the other one because it teaches us how we can break off from this self-generated pain, to recognize where the source of our pain comes from, and to release whatever has encumbered us, whatever makes life a burden. And that, we can actually learn how to transcend our pain. And transcend doesn't mean bypass it by any means. It means transcend means to get on top of it. So how we can change our perspective rather than living from within it, change our relationship to it, and realize that pain has probably been a wonderful impetus and also a very powerful teacher for us. And so then he'll unpack the kleshas in the forthcoming sutra. Kriya means a verb. It means putting it into practice. And interestingly enough, in the last chapter towards the end, as he's describing samadhi, which is really a blanket term, he says you can do yogic practices, you can develop strength over your nervous system and clarity in your mind, etc., but it's not necessarily a spiritual experience. So when we practice these three together, tapas, svadhyaya, and Ishvara pranidhana, with the right intention, with the right action, we offer ourselves in a single direction. The most important part in this action is letting go. That's a real skill, our ability to let go. Because what we hold on to, Patanjali even says your ideas, be careful, that you don't limit your experience or yoga or even your experience of yourself to ideas. That in this process of study, you're going to discover information, you're going to discover personal characteristics, to let all of that go, to offer your sense of self as being the doer into a greater, pervasive, and present intelligence. So it's very interesting because Kriya is the counterpart to karma. And karma is an action that is already completed and then repeats itself through inertia. So until we take Kriya, until we set inert patterns into motion, until we feel dynamic and we move with a dynamic awareness, there is not going to be a fresh wave of action, and our karma remains unchanged. The way we respond to anything will be the way we respond to everything, right? So this is about really becoming an architect and expanding our pathways of response and of experience. So the Kriya Yoga, in this integrated process, it addresses the many facets of our being. We have tapas, which is a refinement of our senses, our motor organs, our sensory organs, and ultimately our nervous system. And it's about developing self-motivation rather than using an external nexus to motivate us, okay? Then there's svadhyaya, which addresses our intellect, and it nourishes our intellect. It refines our psychology, our life philosophy, and our epistemological queries. So what we believe to be true, what we hold to be valuable. And then Ishvara pranidhana addresses our emotional nature and our need for spiritual connection, our need to feed our souls and to live with spirit, to live with a sense of sacredness. Now, interestingly enough, even though we're categorizing these, they all overlap. So it's just the way what we've learned prior to this is that our mind is reductionist and it wants to compartmentalize things into little bite-sized pieces. so that it can digest it. But we'll see they all actually are part of a larger whole. The whole is more than the sum of its parts. So tapas. And it's interesting because tapas traditionally, or at least the way that I was introduced to tapas in the classical tradition, was this sense of asceticism and of sacrifice. And interestingly enough, this is where certain traditions hijacked yogic terms or experiences and then wanted to impose their own agenda. On the other hand, it was also the perspective of someone who wasn't part of the yogic experience or hadn't taken up the yogic path, looking from the outside to these jungle dwellers, to these mountain dwellers, and thinking, oh my God, they live such austere lives. They don't have the creature comforts that I have. And so it was the projection from the outside that because they didn't have these luxuries, they were suffering. But in fact, these mystics who moved into the fringe culture, they chose to live a life of simplicity. They chose to live in nature to experience a sense of primal joy and a sense of wellness and a connection of nature. Does that resonate with you? Okay. Yeah, so there's the simplicity. And rather than being fear-based and letting go of all these creature comforts, it was love-based. It was a deeper desire. So it wasn't a turning away or rejection of life, but an affirmation of their own soul and of their own spiritual connection. So to really give up what was soul crushing and what was superficial, and to realize that, there was so much to discover in this simple essence of life. So this yearning for something more primal, this aching, this burning desire for moksha. And I was reflecting one day, I was like, oh, that's the Constitution. That was the initial impulse, was for freedom, for the pursuit of happiness, right? So these very basic desires, and to be relieved of the neuroticism, the ego obsession, the competitive nature that can happen within culture, and all the needless strain and distractions of maintaining a big lifestyle. Now, tapas, it sounds really romantic, but when we go away or we pull away from the frivolities and the distractions of life, we really have to face ourselves. And tapas is saying you have to be willing to face your own pain and your own discomfort. And by doing that, and by engaging in the yogic practices, which is mostly an experience of discharge, okay, it's a release of the energy that's been held in blockage. This generation of energy starts to activate your spiritual circuitry, which we can think of as even being our neurons and forming new neural connections. So this burning is our ability to burn new neural pathways. And it is done through the ritual of practice. And ritual is not meant to be repetitive, but it is something that we do with consistency. It's where we create time and space to really hold in our consciousness, and I don't mean just our minds, but in our bodies, somatically, track it somatically, what really matters and what's important, what is our primal desire, or what in the Purusharthas is known as kama, your soul's desire. So the sacrifice is that we have to create time, we have to create space, we got to put our energy into it, and maybe give up time for sloth and comfort and recreation, or even just busy working. And as we develop this sense of of awareness and devotion and channeling this energy, it starts to build momentum. And there will be some discomfort. Patanjali says there should be, some stretching of your comfort zone, but we realize that it's part of the purifying aspects of challenging ourselves. So it's like always challenging ourselves a little bit and the right amount so that we don't become dejected and we don't become overwhelmed. All right. So the heart of tapas is humility, and it is developing strength of character. That's really what the yogic process is. So it's not about killing the ego or killing yourself, but a practice of gratitude and opening up to prana, opening up to grace. Tapas also extends off of our mat. It is our forbearance and our graciousness in accepting the idiosyncrasies of another person's, or where our, maybe we're in friction with someone else. So it's wherever there's a sense of rigidity, of allowing that to soften. And this is why when we have a practice, the experience afterwards is a feeling of cellular lightness. As long as we're holding tight, we hold ourselves from a place of external rigidity, these blockages are going to close us off from life. And we'll see that, as we close ourselves off from life, which we can think about as, the way that we breathe, we lose stamina, we lose strength, we might fall into hopelessness. So practice is our ability to let go of these structures that we even feel somatically where we're holding, because the mental structures manifest within our tissues, and tapas is our effort to be part of our own creation through the compressed evolutionary power of yogic practices. All right, so there's several different forms of tapas. There's tapas which is physical. So that's the physical aspect. And this is we can let go of our need for physical comfort, where we feed our addictions, where we self-indulge to refrain from maladaptive habits, or maybe even fast part of the day. It's a practice of inner contentment. And then there's Manasana, which is the mental discipline of practicing serenity, of filling our heart with kindness, and to have clarity and joyfulness of our mind. So Harvard University did a study on consciousness, and they said on average, we have 80,000 thoughts per day. 95% of them are repetitive, and 80% of them are self-negating. So when that self-negating thought arises, our ability to lovingly see that probably it's an untruth that just is a karmic untruth that was a completed action, but it's not actually viable in this moment. So it's to lovingly redirect our own mind, and in an internal openness, observe our own thought process. And then there's Vanmayam, which is the discipline of speech, that we only say what is true and non-irritating. Only what is good and only what is useful. So no gossip, okay? And something is considered gossip when it isn't in the subject's best interest, or it's something that they prefer to not be shared about them. We might talk about somebody, but really in the spirit of health and healing and compassion. So, understand that in your integration. And again, it's more about this internal silence that we're developing. All right. So again, tapas, the function is not so much of doing, but it is the effort of letting go. Abhyasa vairagyabhyam tan nirodha. This is where we are able to transform the raw resources of our mind and our body into a higher consciousness, in a state of pure awareness. So we all have the capacity, Patanjali says, to make the world shine. By yoga is this process of discharge and removing the impediments that obscures our own inner light. So as we hold steady and release in the experience of tapas, this is our process of clearing. And it's just about, in our relationships, letting go of our need for drama, our need to control, our need to assert egocentricity. And it's just an offering of ourselves onto an altar of love that frees up our energy to engage spiritually and to engage in a loving way. All right. So in kind of like just a pontification here of tapas, it's to come into clarity. It's in this letting go of the colors of your mind or the moods and the emotions that arise for you, and to build tolerance for your own unique character traits and flaws and those of the other, but to actively work on your character and getting clear in your mind and your heart and your body. And that this helps you to free up your energy, to redirect it, and to fire a meditation practice or your internal awareness. So tapas is a way, tapas helps us to see where we have holding patterns, where we have psychic signatures or lesions of trauma somatically, to see our habits and how they color us, to understand how our mind works and how then our mind colors our reality. And in that process of revealing it, as soon as it comes into our awareness, we can let it go in a second. Okay? So let's go on to svadhyaya. Svadhyaya is ultimately to know yourself better. Okay, so practice reveals, right? Tapas is a context that gives you a window into the content of your being. And so svadhyaya is self-awareness, and it recognizes that we all have the ability to self-correct and self-direct. And it's so powerful. We're going to learn later in this chapter, svadhyaya ishtadevata samprayogaha, that this type of study in tandem with metaphysical, and I would like to say meta-intellectual awareness, brings about communion with divine forces. So it is this remembrance of the sacred word or mantra. And it was done in tandem with the chanting, because the yogic tradition was oral and it was passed on through sutra, shloka, shastra. And this is where you might take, I'm going to send you a soundbite, and you might just kind of, write it on a card. You can print out the sheet I give you and just hold it loosely and see how the mantra resonates within you. So then we integrate these perspectives. We integrate these points of view into our daily life. And it's not so much to be a mental questioning, because that's just another form of fixating on the I sense or the ego sense, but it's more about moving beyond the I sense and to realize that it's our process of inquiry that actually helps us to source our deepest wisdom. And I remember reading, I'll have to look up the gentleman's name, but he was saying answers come easily and they go just as quickly. It's the questions that we live by that define who we are. So this questioning process through study, through integration of sutra and metaphysical teachings is what fuels the light of insight. And this light of insight is the spark of enlightenment, which empowers us to learn from ourselves and to harness potential for limitless understanding. And Patanjali, you know, he's really loose. He gives you such an elastic and non-dogmatic system. In fact, he was considered a revolutionary of his time because prior to that, you had to have a guru, you had to do ritual sacrifices and have, you know, religious authorities pray for you, etc. He was saying, no, this is completely, it's on you. What you want to experience, how deeply tapas, how deeply your yearning is going to fuel your quality of experience. So, you know, really, you can study anything you want. You can even, your study could be to track somatically, like, oh, I felt something, like, oh, I felt a shiver up my spine, or I felt my skin, what we call in Hawaii, chicken skin, you know, something that came alive for me. To really follow your interest, to live with spirit, to live with passion, and to focus on what like cracks you open or brings you alive. So this will help you to keep your priorities straight rather than doing what you think you should do. All right. And again, that's where yoga is so unique from many religious paths. Yoga can enhance your religious experience, but it's about really, again, being motivated through your own connection to source. So svadhyaya is about keeping our priorities straight. What's important to you? And to realize that life is for learning. So to be conscious of our attitudes, to really consider what is valuable enough for our time. The way that we express our love and our attention is through what we give our time to. And it's our dedication and devotion to clear priorities. It is to realize that we are here to take the raw stuff of who we are, our emotions, of our body, of our experience, of our past experiences, and to see where we want to go, what we want to create from that. So spa means to sweeten. How can we bring sweetness into our lives? What is true pleasure versus a passing interest or an indulgence? Svadhyaya is a way that we can really see if the practices are transforming our experience of self and how we offer ourselves whole when we come into yoga as our own healing and our own experience of our wholeness, that the fractures don't define us. We offer ourselves into the whole. So are these teachings really, are we bringing them home into ourselves? It helps us to utilize our strengths to the fullest, and also to develop the aspects of ourself that are maybe, you know, not quite so developed, that could use a little more love and attention. So in this process of svadhyaya, then all of our egoic energies and our personality, ego-personality complex come into full service of our soul and our spirit. And this, Patanjali says, this self-study, this self-correction with sweetness, okay? Not, we're only human, So it's not a project of perfection. It's feeling our own unique perfection, right? There's only one of you, and you are an unfolding. You are constantly unfolding. Yoga is said to be the uncrumpling of ourselves, where we expand and bloom and open. That in this process, it creates, as we open, it creates a suctorial action that brings wisdom and fulfillment and contentment into us, or prajna. So then, as we're in this process of tapas, of passionately letting go, and I was reflecting on this, like, it's easy to let something go when you have your awareness on something that is of greater priority, right? But sometimes it's hard to let go when you don't know what that is, right? And you might hold on because you're afraid that there's going to be nothing on the other side. But it's like, you look at a toddler and they're holding on to something and you redirect. So yoga is that ability to continually redirect ourselves to what's really meaningful. And this is even, svadhyaya and the self-study, and tapas, the forbearance, is when we put those together, it's to realize the power of forgiveness. So to forgive ourselves, to forgive others, so we can lift our personal energy, so we can move on and have a sense of freedom. And even practice abhyasa is to check the downward pull. So sadhana pada are these teachings, or insights that are here to help us elevate our experience and to lift ourselves up. It's meant to be an uplifting experience. So this forgiveness, which doesn't mean that there isn't accountability, but it's where we don't hold on to the sense of being victimized or disempowered. When we come into this spirit forgiveness, it's the loving thing to do, and it clears the path. And it's our ability to forgive even when we are not being asked to. In that release, then we feel this wave well up within us of energy. It brings us into peace. It brings us into a position of power. When if we're in fear and we're holding on, this becomes an obstacle to hearing our higher voice and our higher selves. Svadhyaya culminates in realizing our humanity, along with Ishvara Pranidhana, and realizing that there is a transpersonal nature of self that is timeless. It's unlimited. We are part of a larger unified field of awareness, and the experiences of coming home to yourself. Tada drashtuhu svarupe vastanam, of coming to land and to really embody your spiritual nature with soul, with real gusto, with passion. And we find this in the pauses between breaths, particularly at the end of our exhale. Patanjali says, in that moment, there's utter unified awareness. And we realize this divinity somatically. It's a physiological experience. It's not an intellectual experience. All right. So now we're on to Ishvara Pranidhana. Isa, and I'm going to put this in your notes, by the way, I'll send you some notes. Isa means the divine center. It also means what is. Okay, just simply what is. Vara means of all reality. Pra, discovered by moving. Okay, and moving isn't necessarily grasping, but it can just be being moved, internal response. Mi means deeply. It's such a rich language. And dana is the core of one's being and heart. It also means wealth, and it's like the wealth, the jewels of the heart. You know, these aren't physical jewels. These are the jewels that are already available to us. So Ishvara Pranidhana often is described as surrender to a higher power, or you must surrender to God. But really, Patanjali, again, he was a renegade. He was like, this isn't surrendering to something outside of yourself. It's an embrace of the great integrity. The embracing the great integrity that interconnects us all. It's to recognize that we were created whole with a full capacity for love, for intimacy. In fact, Patanjali says one of our siddhis, or our supernatural powers, is our ability to heal ourselves. I love that. In mind, in body, and in heart. And so Ishvara Pranidhana is to practice the presence of divinity. It is to feed the holy, to put on your earrings and put on a nice shirt, to light a candle, to realize that life is a celebration of beauty, of creativity, that it's the way that we hold and revere the moment-to-moment experiences of our life with presence, even though it may be uncomfortable sometimes, tapas, that raw experience is really what tells us that we are alive and we are part of life. So it's our ability to hold sacred space, to feel there is a benevolence underlying all of creation. And again, it's to live the life of a mystic in which we're always searching for the wholeness, the oneness, the healing, and blessing, even in adversity. It is to awaken and embrace grace as an inner voice that transforms a moment into something better. Ishvara Pranidhana. So Ishvara Pranidhana means to fill with wishes, to bring forth wealth. And I think of it as a well-wisher. Supposed to, what do they call it? Freudenschade. Okay, so we wish well, we see blessings. And the way that we express it is to surrender our agenda, where the parts of the ego or the parts of the self, they each have an agenda. When we come into our wholeness, or Purusha, which is pure awareness, it has that unified sense of purpose. So this is devotion. This is where we don't, you can do things the right way. You can be very studied, and it's still not a spiritual experience. It was Mr. Iyengar who said, until we penetrate our hearts, until we penetrate our bodies and our minds with consciousness, it's not a spiritual experience. So this is not a philosophy. This is embodiment of your own unique truth and wholeness. So as we devote ourselves to learning and growth, we're willing to constantly submit our limited perspective to an expanded awareness, to the Ishta Devatas, or the virtues of light, of truth, of love, of union, communion, healing, wholeness. And it's our recognition and our alliance to a greater reality. So this is Ishvara Pranidhana, removes a feeling of alienation, and we realize that we're always connected to one another and source. Okay. Now, Ishvara Pranidhana is the way that we kind of get over ourselves all the time with a sense of humor. We realize our humanity, and we also don't just through apathy go, oh, well, that's just the way I am. But we work through svadhyaya and tapas to self-correct maladaptive behaviors. And we understand that it doesn't define our worth. In fact, it makes us a better person to be willing to grow and to learn and adapt. And this is what creates this healthy spiritual life and psycho-spiritual maturity, which is just progressively growing out of narcissism. And as we overcome, it's naturally, we're all born narcissists, but over time we need to grow out of it and realize that everybody feels they're the center. As we overcome narcissism, we overcome, Patanjali says, our fear of death, as well as our fear of life. It opens us up to experience life. We let go of perfectionism, this idea that we have to have it all together. We can let go of ideologies that don't serve us, stereotypes, unreasonable dislikes or dvesha, even whole lifestyles. And, you know, it can be painful to give parts of ourselves up, but we realize that every time we do, a greater experience opens up to us. And it's that holding space for infinite possibility and a moment-to-moment practice of just being with what is and finding the nectar in that moment. So these three together is yoga in action. Kriya Yoga. These are not ideas. These are not words. These are words to become part of your own flesh, part of your own heart, that are already, in fact, within you and just waiting. The sutras are meant to like bring them back to life. Yoga isn't something that we do, but it's our experience of linking up to love, of entrusting ourselves with, and as I learned from Deb, that at the root of trust is patience. That, you know, Patanjali says at the end of the first pada, like the spiritual awakening, it's a strong experience and it takes time. Let the yoga meet you where you're at. You know, it's like enjoy the unfolding of coming into this awareness. What we consider to be suffering is our ignorance that there's a greater purpose, that there's a learning behind every friction, behind every discord. There's an opportunity for healing into wholeness. We only call it suffering when life goes against our own blueprint. So he says here, yoga is practice, practice, practice. The way that we practice shows us the way that we live. So then it's not just practice, 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 but to live these, you know, with this focused awareness, with this greater intent. Through tapas, svadhyaya, and ishvara pranidhana, the more we understand who we are, the more it simplifies our activities and the complexities of life. The more we're able to be clear and streamline our involvements with life. This frees up our energy so that we can have true connection to source, true connection with one another, because yoga is ultimately relationship. And to really feel ourselves in resonance and in harmony with life and the great integrity or the whole. And that as we do this and we gain momentum, it becomes more natural. It accelerates and our yoga practice naturally becomes more fulfilling. Tapas, svadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana, live a path with heart. Then your life, Patanjali, he invites you to rewrite it as a love story, as a great adventure, the hero's path. honey in your heart. So we do have some time here at the end, and because there's quite a few of us here, how many of you would like to do a breakout room and do some sharing? Is there anybody? How many of you wouldn't like to do it? Okay, all right. So you don't have to if you don't want to, but everyone here is really lovely, and I invite you to do it. And so what you'll be getting every week is, because again, the sutras are a process of self-inquiry, and just kind of, and it's not like you have to sit down and journal these questions, but just to hold the question even loosely and see, oftentimes it's when you're not fixating on it, the answer will come, maybe as you're waking up in the morning or as you're going to sleep, or, nature reveals herself. These moments, Patanjali describes it as a flash of insight. So it's a way of paying attention. And I will offer you what I call divya drishti, or points of personal inquiry and insight. So my question for you, and I invite you to share this in your breakout rooms, is what does freedom mean to you? What does freedom mean to you? And sadhana, which is the name of this chapter, and it also implies practice, is to go directly to that goal of freedom. How does yoga, what comes between you and that goal? And how can yoga help you to remove the impediments? So it's kind of a three-part question. You can take any part of it as you like. And what does freedom mean to you? What do you need freedom from? In order to have freedom for? That's from the Dalai Lama. And how can yoga and the sutras help you to find that within yourselves? Right? So I'm going to give you some breakout rooms here. Let's see, we've got with about 3 people each. And have a wonderful discussion. Aloha. Mantra is a form of pranayama, and actually you can do it just internally. And I don't know about you, I can have several things going in my mind at the same time. So you could throw the mantra in there, and maybe you hold loosely, that I'm gonna chant this mantra 5 times a day and just see what happens. And just see how it starts to become, it awakens within your own resonant field. And then it's really cool because even if you don't do it, some of these words will just pop into your consciousness at different times, and it's just part of the integration, part of the assimilation process. Or maybe you say, I could do it 3 times, and you maybe, like when you brush your teeth, like put it on the mirror, right? Somewhere you always go, or where you do your dishes, or on the inside of the outhouse door, somewhere where you're going to be sitting. Something like that. Yeah. No, some people are having some very deep conversations here. All right, well, I think I'm gonna, we've been in there for like 20 minutes. So again, check in with me on the Facebook thing if you want to deepen these conversations and communications, because I'm going to post a poem. Actually, it's called She Let Go. What a great name, right? So I'm going to post that and we can share. And also the picture of the Facebook group, it's the Naga, I can't remember, the Shiva Naga Linga Pushpa. It's like the most beautiful flower ever. I saw it in South India. I've been looking for it for over 20 years. It's magic. So there'll be little things for us to share there as well. What a great, great adventure we are on. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to close the rooms. And they're closing in less than a minute. You have a very royal wave, Suzanne.
I'm watching The Crown. Did you ever watch that series?
No, I want to.
Oh, it's good.
I want to.